Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
Fat max heart rate. That's the maximum rate of fat oxidation per minute. And if you were to go faster than that, you burn fewer fat calories per minute in favor of a distinct spike in burning glucose calories. And what's happening physiologically is when you get to this pace where you don't have enough oxygen to emphasize fatty acids, you have to switch over to the quicker burning fuel source of glucose. And of course, there are benefits to training the glycolytic systems, the glucose burning systems with high intensity exercise. But what happens when you kind of go a little bit too hard over and over again as your routine exercise pattern, that's when you can fall into these patterns of breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury.
A way to calculate that zone 2 max, is that like 180 less your age? Is that right?
So if you take 180 less your age.
This week, I interviewed best-selling author and former national champion and number 3 world-ranked professional triathlete, Brad Kearns. We discussed his new book with Mark Sisson, Born to Walk, along with problems with traditional shoes and a sedentary lifestyle, the benefits of minimalist shoes, how to build an aerobic base, the right way to do high-intensity training, and much, much more. Really enjoyed my interview with Brad. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin. And for the 10th time, Brad Kearns is on the podcast. How do you feel, Brad?
So great to be back with you, Brian. We always have fun stuff to talk about, both on and off the recording. So luckily today, we're just getting rolling. We got a lot of business to take care of, especially with this forthcoming book and the compelling premise that Mark Sisson and I present. But it's always a pleasure, and we have so much passion for living a healthy, fit lifestyle, delaying aging, all that great stuff. So I appreciate the good work you're doing.
I appreciate your podcast as well, the B.rad podcast. I listen to quite a bit, and now you have a book coming out. And what book is this number for you? Is this your 3rd or 4th book? I mean, you had cookbooks back in the
I'm
day.
over
right?
20 now in my career
way
of,
off.
co-authoring with Mark Sisson quite a few over the last 16 years. So we've had a great run as a dream team, putting together these ideas. And it's really interesting how some of this stuff takes shape, and it's very organic in our sense. So we're not like on some publication schedule and we have to force a book, squeeze out some book because we're on the clock. But instead, we kind of let time go by and we think about things that are of most interest to us. And this book, Born to Walk, was just emanated from, a renewed interest in walking as the centerpiece of a healthy, active, energetic lifestyle. And of course, as you know, Mark launched the Palooza 5-toe minimalist shoe brand about a year and a half ago. So we're encouraging people to, get your feet back into the game, get out of those elevated constrictive shoes and wear these barefoot style shoes. And in hand with that is the obligation to just move more in general everyday life. And now it's come out that the leading experts in health, fitness, exercise, physiology, disease prevention are asserting that just moving more is more beneficial and more important to longevity and disease prevention than adhering to a devoted fitness regimen. And of course, you get all kinds of benefits from being in the gym and being out there doing your cardio and living a long, healthy, strong life. But the sedentary patterns that the modern human is in is the number one public health problem possibly in the world, along with eating crappy food and all the topics that you discuss on your show and getting good sleep. But even people who are in the fitness category and go to the gym and put in their weekly mileage, nevertheless have these disastrous patterns of staying still for hours and hours on end. So you have like the runner who's training for a Chicago Marathon and running 30 miles a week and then up to 50 before the race. And then every day they get on the subway, they go to a tall building, they sit at a desk, they ride the subway home, and they sit and watch Netflix at night. And so they're in this category of what scientists have called or coined the active couch potato syndrome. And there's a study from Denmark that we reference in the book where they categorized these 4 groups of citizens and they ranked them according to their health and disease risk factors. And the people who were the people who were generally active and had fitness, of course, were the best. but the active couch potatoes, people that went to the gym and maintained a fitness level, but were otherwise sedentary, scored below the people who just walked around a lot during the day and perhaps did their gardening and walked their dog. And it's kind of an eye opener to think that you're not protected from these diseases of sedentary living just because you slammed out that 6 a.m. spin class and then went about your very mellow, quiet day.
Yeah, it's a different take on things. I mean, you hear like non-exercise activity thermogenesis, right? Like, and how beneficial that could be. Those are the things that you do outside of your workout. And so I guess one way of calling it is what'd you call it? The couch potato, the active couch potato.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
this goes back to evolutionary biology and the genetics of the Homo sapien species. And we know from research with modern day hunter-gatherers, the Hadza in Tanzania, which has been widely touted, the human has a critical obligation to be in near constant movement throughout the day in order for the body, the hormones, the metabolic system, the hormonal system to work properly. And so if we're seated, research shows that in as little as 20 minutes, we get a measurable decline in glucose tolerance and a rise in insulin resistance in as little as 20 minutes of sitting around. And we also have a decline in cognition in our cognitive powers from being still. So the assignment for modern human is to get up and take little breaks when you are seated in front of a screen, and of course sprinkle in a properly designed fitness program. But that first objective is to get up and move around more, and that's a big one. And I think to understand this best, I have a little anecdote in the book about the Panthera leo, that's the African lion, and the genetics of the lion mandate that that lion sleeps for around 20 hours every day. And then it launches an all-out attack that never lasts longer than 30 seconds, and they get their prey, usually at dusk. They have to lay around all day because they don't dissipate heat well, so they're supposed to sleep. That is the lion living his or her best life according to their genetics, in contrast to the human, completely different species that needs to putz around and move their body and move their joints all day long.
interesting. Yeah, and you see these standing desks, which is or like even the treadmill desk now, where you're just sort of I had talked to someone who has like they walk at like one very low level walking, but they just while they're doing their work. Is this something you think you would recommend someone, or is that a little bit overkill?
It's an interesting point because, of course, you're going to get benefits from standing up and you're going to avoid some of those real problems with sitting where you lose functionality in the hamstrings, the hip flexors, and the glutes, and all those associated problems. But like Katie Bowman talks about with her nutritious movement programming, what we really want to get away from is repetition.
Hmm.
So if you're standing up at your desk all day long, it's possibly better than sitting. But again, you're going to feel sore and stiff, and you're going to feel pretty crappy if you're just standing in one spot for 8 hours. So the idea of variation in the workplace is something that I embrace and that Katie talks about a lot. We have a digital course called Don't Just Sit There that's on my website where you can learn the exercises and the drills and how to set things up. And a lot of people talk about like the ergonomically correct position for working, where your wrists are supposed to be at 90 degrees dropping onto the keyboard and your elbows are at 90 and your torso is standing still and all that kind of thing. And that is, likely safer than twisting and contorting and hunching over as you're typing on the keyboard. But any position that you hold for too long is going to be unhealthy. So the objective throughout our day and our life is to just engage in a lot of variation and be on the move. And perhaps what I do during the day is like I sit down on the ground, Brian, for long periods of time. And so I prefer working. I have this little, it's like a TV tray that I put my laptop on. So I have a seated workplace position. I, of course, have a standing desk where I have the laptop, up on a stool. And then I have a chair and a desk as well. And then I sometimes will go chill on the couch and relax and have all the pillows around me. So all that stuff is okay. And none is, it's not necessarily one better than the other to brag how many hours you stand up versus how many you sit down. It's just the idea of keeping things moving and varied.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kneeling right now. You would never know that, but
I
I
didn't
actually,
know that. I can't
yeah.
believe it.
Do you
Wow.
think I'm the only person in this, let's just stay in the state of Illinois, who actually kneels at their desk?
Besides the those in the priesthood, it could be, you could be an outlier.
I mean, think about that. I'm like trying to set a trend here. No one knows about it. And I'm actually kneeling. I now I have a thick pad and actually need to replace this one soon. But
You're wearing holes in your desk pad. That's great.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I like it. I think it helps me with posturally and get out of hip flexion, extend my hips, use my glutes a little bit. And in the beginning it took some time to get used to, but maybe I can start a trend, Brad.
That's great. I'm going to try it. I really am interested in that because my position on the ground is, sitting with my back against the wall. But it's called ground force reaction, and that counts for you too. And what happens is you're now obligated to support your skeletal weight when you're kneeling, or even when you're sitting with your butt on the ground and your legs on the ground. And so your muscles and your connective tissue are actually getting stimulation. They're being forced to support body weight rather than when you plop into a chair and then you deload the important muscles, joints, connective tissue. And that's when you get that atrophy and that weakening and that hunching over of your spine and all that stuff that happens when you allow yourself to enjoy the fruits of modern convenience.
let's let's sort of dive into a little bit about, like, I know your book, and I think there's maybe a bit of confusion because you have on one side of the coin you have these minimalist shoes that are coming out, and I actually have a buddy who wants to make them for golf shoes. He hasn't done it yet, but that would be a cool one. But I wear Vibrams. I've tried the Paluvas and they fit a little bit differently, but they're very similar to like the five finger Paluva ones. I'm not sorry, the five finger, what's the brand? Vibrams, I think. But anyways, what is what is the deal with these cushion shoes that some people swear by? And I'm trying to think of the name. The hookahs are become popular. What's the big issue with having too much cushion?
Well, what we've had in modern life, actually for hundreds of years now, are these designed elevated cushion shoes for work and for leisure, and recently in the last 50 years for sport, especially the advent of the running shoe back in the 70s by Nike. And so this comfortable elevated cushion shoe, and now today the super cushion shoe. Hoka is a leading brand, like you said, but all the brands have these really, really puffy shoes that are high off the ground, and they enable you to run down pavement with a sensation of comfort. And so, without those shoes, it would be very difficult to run more than a few minutes because of the pain immediately inflicted into a body that's ill prepared for an activity. So, the invention of the cushion shoe 50 years ago basically launched the running boom and allowed generally unfit, poorly adapted people to be able to shuffle down the road and do a 10K or do a half marathon or do a marathon. Now, getting sedentary people off the couch and into any activity is obviously a positive thing. But what the book talks about is how we've kind of been socialized and sold a fabrication and a ruse that running is actually healthy for you, and that wearing these shoes are good for your body and help protect you against injury and impact trauma. And actually, the research is very clear that the opposite is true. So when you put on an elevated cushioned shoe and run down the road, you have a sensation of comfort because the proprioception is cut off. The awareness of the impact is muted by that giant cushioned sole. So what happens is people who are poorly adapted to run are running with horrible form and exerting a lot of impact trauma into the body, into the muscles, joints, connective tissue throughout the lower extremities, and getting injured again and again. So the shoe feels good because it cuts you off from the sensation of how your body is landing on the ground, especially a hard surface. And so you can plod along. And the stride that we see generally with the jogging community is this overstriding, heel striking, breaking, jarring pattern. Rather than when you look at an Olympic runner running around the track, they have this beautiful, graceful stride where they're landing on their midfoot over a balanced center of gravity over the center of their body and running with great efficiency and minimal impact trauma. So that's the problem that we have today with these shoes. And it's a difficult thing to extricate from because you mentioned the brand Vibram that came out about 18 years ago now. And then the book Born to Run. Our book is kind of a tongue-in-cheek takeoff on that title, with ours being called Born to Walk. But Born to Run, glorified the amazing ability of the human to engage in endurance exercise. And they featured these primitive living Tarahumara natives down in Copper Canyon in Mexico, and some great Western runners went down there to participate in their events. And it was really a celebration of the humans' amazing genetic attributes for running long distances. Now, that might be all well and good, but for the average person who has spent years and decades in sedentary patterns and not being athletic since their high school days were over, what happens is they put on these beautiful modern shoes and they go and get themselves injured, not to mention burnt out, exhausted, fatigued from running at too strenuous a pace. And I'm sure we'll talk about that part a little bit later. But yeah, the shoes are the driving cause of running overuse injuries. And this is, again, strongly validated by research. But all we have seen against that over the last 50 years is marketing hype and flawed and deceptive advertising. And this was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, where they said the flawed and deceptive advertising represents a, quote, public health hazard because they're pitching these shoes to help control pronation or minimize injury risk. And there's never been a single shred of data to show that running shoes help prevent injury. Instead, they promote injury because they allow you to run with crappy form and that jarring breaking stride.
So, if someone wanted to get into the minimalist shoe, what do you recommend? Like, obviously, you got to sort of ease yourself into this thing, especially if you've been using the thicker soles for a long time.
Yeah, great follow-up question. Thank you. Because when we want to do these specialized activities that are very difficult, like go and play pickup basketball, you're not going to go into the gym barefoot and post up on a guy who's taller than you and try to make a basket. So when you're doing these challenging activities, of course, you need the appropriate footwear that makes it, safe and possible for you to do it. So the idea, especially the one that we're promoting directly with the Palooza movement and in the book, is to just get to a more barefoot inspired lifestyle in a careful and graceful manner, which means walk around your home as often as possible barefoot, or other safe areas like if you're going to the beach or wherever you can, but then wear these minimalist shoes to get more walking into your life. It's no injury risk to walk around barefoot or in a barefoot style shoe because there's no impact trauma beyond one times body weight, right? Your foot's on the ground, one foot's on the ground always when you're walking. So it's one times body weight impact. In contrast, even a slow jogger is imparting 2 to 3 times body weight impact on every stride. And you can look at the data from the lab and discover that even going on an easy 5 mile jog, someone weighing 150 pounds is imparting 2.3 million pounds of impact trauma into the lower extremities. And because they're likely wearing these elevated cushion shoes, they're running with poor form, and that impact trauma is inappropriately dispersed. So that's the problem. Like, the shoes are the necessary evil in order to go out there and jog on the sidewalk, but they're also the cause of injury. So to fight back against that, you want to get more into this barefoot mode where you're putting a lot of time in walking around barefoot or in minimalist shoes. And then if you insist upon running and insist upon training for these events that are by and large unhealthy and too strenuous, then you're going to mitigate the damage that's caused by cramping your feet into these shoes every time you run.
And if someone was wanting to get into running, I know, like, for people that don't know, obviously you were professional right? Triathlete, right? For how many
Yeah, I was a
years?
runner in high school and college, and then I became a triathlete, was on the pro circuit for 9 years. So, same with Mark Sisson, my co-author. We were old time endurance guys, and we lived and breathed these sports, and they were a huge part of our lives. And we had, ambitious goals and trained our butts off for many, many years. But now, in reflection, and this is what we get into right away in the book, is that running is an extremely challenging and grueling activity for the human. It's not that humans are born to run and we can all take off running like it's nothing. It takes a lot of adaptability and conditioning and general functional fitness foundation before you should even aspire to take off down the road and run for more than a mile or two. But unfortunately, again, because of the shoes, it's possible for someone to shuffle along pretty soon and spend, 5, 10, 15 miles out there doing something that is generally too stressful for the body and is going to lead to injury inevitably. And the research on the rate of running injuries among regular runners is absolutely stunning. Yale University School of Medicine says 50% of runners get injured every year, 50% of regular runners, and 25% of runners are injured at any given time, which
Is that
is it's
is
embarrassing. I mean, it's like what is going on when you're not getting tackled out there, when you're running on the lake shore or in the trails in the woods by your house, there's something wrong with this picture.
is that a combination of bad form, or is that because partly because the shoes, obviously, as well, right?
It's a good question. You set me up good there because here's what's going on. The reasons that runners have poor form is lack of general fitness capabilities. So you don't have strong enough hip flexors. We don't have the hamstring flexibility. We have poor ankle flexibility so that you're not getting the full power out of your stride, nor are you absorbing impact appropriately due to muscular insufficiencies and lack of experience, right? Since it's been 5, 10, or 20 years since you were running around the playground as a little kid, whatever. Now, because of the shoes, they allow this shuffling, breaking, overstriding pattern that is kind of the default stride and the default gait pattern for someone who's not super athletic. And again, go and compare to the Olympic runners and watch how they run with that amazing force production on every stride and the ability to maintain a level pelvis, for example, when they impact the ground, rather than there's this tendency, it's called pelvic drop. And so on an average jogger, you'll see them jogging through the park and their pelvis is unstable with every impact because they're not strong enough. And that is probably some research believes that's the single biggest indicator of someone who's about to go and get injured is they have this contralateral pelvic drop. They're like they can't absorb the impact well enough. And the whole thing can be solved by simply slowing down and putting in that time as a cardiovascular fitness enthusiast with walking or with pedaling a bicycle or doing a rowing machine or any of those machines that are low or no impact in the gym where you don't have this danger and this destruction of impact trauma from the simple act of jogging. And I'm talking about even very slow jogging. So if someone's listening going, well, I'm not an extreme runner racing at the front of the pack, it's the entire pack that suffers from this overstriding pattern. The research from Dr. Lieberman at Harvard contends that 80 to 95% of all recreational runners exhibit this overstriding heel striking pattern. And here's a quick fix, Brian. This is a fun one where if you want to realize what it's like to run with correct form, you can take your shoes off, go barefoot, and go to a safe surface like an indoor wooden gymnasium or hard floor or a sidewalk and take off running for several strides on the gym floor or the sidewalk. And what will happen immediately, no
Like
matter how
self-adjust.
fit you
Yeah.
are, no matter how overweight you are, and how poorly adapted you are going to run with a beautiful grace of a deer, as light as possible, because your brain, right away, when you're barefoot and you have that proprioception, that connection with the ground, you are going to immediately exhibit a graceful midfoot landing over a balanced center of gravity because it's simply too painful to do anything but run with perfect form. We have the intuitive ability to do so. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying to, hey, leave your fancy $200 shoes at home and start running barefoot, because that's what happened back. I was saying it a bit earlier, like when the five toe shoes came out and when the book came out, people were all celebrating this idea that, minimalist was the way to go. And the author, Chris McDougall, did a fantastic job explaining that, yes, the foot works better when you don't have that padding and when you're able to use the natural functionality of the foot and the 26 bones and joints, and it's a quarter of all the bones and joints in the body are in the foot. It's worked. It's designed for shock absorption. It's designed for forward propulsion, and you can let that all come into play. But if you've spent your whole life wearing shoes, you're going to be very, very poorly adapted to run in minimalist shoes. So it's a huge, a challenge to try to drift away from these cushioned shoes and trend toward minimalist shoes. But runners are doing it everywhere. And there's a lot of popular brands that are now doing this. It's called a zero drop shoe, where there's not that elevation of the heel. The heel and the midfoot are at the same level. That allows your Achilles tendon and your arch to go through their whole range of motion. But it's a delicate process that's best facilitated by doing a lot of walking.
Yeah, well, I talk about walking a lot on this podcast. So you're, three dogs, two dogs, but three walks a day for me.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so cool, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm getting out there. And what would you say, like, so building an aerobic base, right? I know you talk a lot about that. And how do people know what they should do as far as building an aerobic? Like, is that like a certain percentage of your max heart rate? How do people sort of navigate that?
Yeah, good question, because we've talked about the impact trauma and the propensity for injury with the shoes. And then the other destructive aspect of the running scene and the running boom is that by and large, most people are training at a pace that's far too strenuous to really deliver the proper health, longevity, disease prevention benefits. And instead, the running act becomes another form of stress in a already overly stressful modern lifestyle. So the proper way to build aerobic conditioning is at a comfortable pace that emphasizes fat burning. And if you are doing steady state cardio at a pace that's faster than this optimal zone, what's going to happen is you're putting in a lot of stress into the workout and you're emphasizing glucose burning instead of fat burning. So you become what we call a sugar burner who comes home from the workout and feels a little depleted and, foggy and light. And then they want to go hit the freezer immediately to pound a pint of Ben and Jerry's because of this repeated glycogen depletion from these workouts that are slightly to significantly too stressful. And so what happens is, instead of developing into an endurance machine, a fat burning machine that can go all day at a decent pace, you become like a jalopy that you put, high octane fuel in, and you can go and, drag race, and then you're kind of beat up after a while. So instead of building that fat burning engine, jogging at a pace that's slightly too significantly too stressful will inhibit your aerobic development and kind of turn you into a sugar burning stress head. And the other thing of great interest is that when you train too hard, you do not reduce excess body fat. In fact, you send the genetic signals to preserve excess body fat and even add a spare tire, the visceral fat, which is occurring because of overly stressful lifestyle patterns, including overly stressful exercise. And that becomes real trouble because you develop this skinny fat physique, they call it in the running scene, where you see someone who they still have a little paunch, but they're emaciated otherwise, and they're not carrying a lot of muscle mass because their training is too stressful and catabolic.
All right. So you're saying that as far as running is concerned, and building a solid aerobic base, you should be doing that at a slower pace than what you think. And if you want to do some more intense workouts, it probably depends on the individual and their background. I'm sure some people can push it more than others, but you don't want to, let's say, like, I started actually doing a little bit of sprinting, but only sprinting. I know, like, even talking with who is you've had him on the podcast, the high intensity repeat training.
Craig Marker.
Yeah, Craig Marker, that you want to, if you're going to do a sprint, you want to come back and do that next sprint just as fast and as powerful as you did the last one.
Yeah.
And so that's sort
So
of my mindset, my thought around when I do sprints is, I'll go for 8 to 10, 12 seconds, but then I'll make sure that I can recover. Let's just say it's a minute at least, and I can come back just as strong the next time around.
yeah, that's great. I mean, the objective for the human to develop total body functional fitness for longevity is to achieve not just this aerobic conditioning, but also to be strong and put your body under resistance load frequently with strength training, and then to do brief, explosive, all-out sprints. Not many people are going to go do this on the football field where they're running high impact on flat ground, but you can sprint on a stationary bike or a rowing machine or in the swimming pool or up the stadium stairs rather than on the flat. So you can find a way to do brief, explosive efforts that are near all out. And that has by far the best return on investment of any exercise. So a sprint workout where the accumulated effort is only a couple minutes of really hard stuff can deliver better payoff, especially for fat reduction, than doing a cardio workout that's 5 or 10 or 20 times as long. Like the cardio is generally catabolic, especially the way most people do it, where the sprinting is sending the anabolic signaling to drop excess body fat, build and maintain lean muscle mass, and get that sculpted physique that people are dreaming of when they're burning all these calories running down the road. But to answer that question back when you said, what pace should I go at to develop aerobically, that's entirely individual because what we want to measure is your rate of fat burning per minute and what we call fat max heart rate. That's the maximum rate of fat oxidation per minute. And if you were to go faster than that, what would happen is, of course, you're going to burn more calories the faster you go, right? You're going to burn more calories sprinting than you are jogging. But there's a point you can put it on a graph when you're in an exercise physiology lab. But I'm going to tell you a way to just measure it by heart rate. This fat max heart rate is your maximum fat burning, and if you were to speed up, you burn fewer fat calories per minute in favor of a distinct spike in burning glucose calories. And what's happening physiologically is when you get to this pace where you don't have enough oxygen to emphasize fatty acids, you have to switch over to the quicker burning fuel source of glucose. And of course, there are benefits to training the glycolytic systems, the glucose burning systems with high intensity exercise. But what happens when you kind of go a little bit too hard over and over again as your routine exercise pattern, that's when you can fall into these patterns of breakdown, burnout, illness, and injury. So to take your pace back to fat max heart rate or below for the vast majority of your endurance exercise, the vast majority of your cardio workouts is going to help you feel refreshed and energized afterward. You're not going to kick into these compensation factors that occur when you train too hard, which is your brain telling you to eat more food and to be more lazy throughout the day. That's what happens when you push yourself too hard with these steady state chronic cardio workouts, we call them. Instead, you're active, energetic, and that walk around the block with the dogs makes you feel alert, energized, oxygenated without the drawbacks of a workout that's slightly too stressful.
And a way to calculate that sort of like that zone two max, is that
Yeah.
like 180 lesser age? Is that right?
So if you take 180 less your age, a 40-year-old person is going to be 180 minus 40. 140 is their estimated fat max heart rate. And you can also find this ventilatory threshold in a lab by paying $100 and doing the test with your mouth, breathing through the oxygen tubes. But 180 minus your age is a widely respected formula from Dr. Phil Maffetone, and it's a really good guess for maximum fat burning. The shocking thing for most people, if they're not used to measuring heart rate or regulating their pace, is that it's very, very comfortable pace. And you can certainly feel fine even as you exceed that fat max heart rate and drift into the more glucose burning heart rates. But the point here is to, over time, continue to build your conditioning and your efficiency with fat burning such that your pace gets faster at that same fat max heart rate. So if a 40-year-old's going out at 140 beat per minute and looking at their watch and setting their beeper alarm, and they start jogging and the thing starts beeping, that means they're constrained to a brisk walk right now because that's where their maximum fat burning occurs. And even if they try to jog, they go into sugar burning, to oversimplify the message. Now, if you adhere to this for 3 or 6 or 12 months, what's going to happen is one day, because you're improving your fat burning capabilities, you will be able to proceed at a slow jog while still holding on to that 140 beats per minute heart rate. And it's not very well received by the endurance community, to put it lightly, to tell everyone slow down in order to train your body to a higher level in order to go faster. However, this is the type of training strategy that has been exhibited by the leading endurance athletes in every sport for the past 60 years, dating back to Arthur Lydiard's runners in New Zealand breaking world records and winning gold medals by going slow and working on their strength and their aerobic capacity. So we must honor the examples of the world's elite athletes. And generally, we have a widespread obligation to slow down and build that aerobic system properly. But then you talk about the other pieces of the total fitness pie, which are sprinting and strength training. So if you're able to slow down and not exhaust yourself with your 30 or 40 or 50 miles a week at, non-aerobic heart rates, then you have the energy to go into the gym and get some good work done with your X3 bar or with your weight
Ooh.
machines or whatever you're doing, as well as once in a while, once a week is plenty, to do a proper sprint workout where you're working that top end, that anaerobic explosive performance. And that's super important for all of us as we age, because we lose our anaerobic power, and the anaerobic muscle fibers, the type 1 fibers, the type 2 fibers go away much more quickly than the aerobic endurance fibers, which we have the ability to preserve pretty well through aging.
Well, I can tell you, I just did my sprint workout chasing my dog
Yeah,
through the
that's
forest. Every time it happens, I'm like, I better get this guy. But it's like, talk about an all-out sprint trying to chase a 30-pound beagle in the forest.
those guys can get quick.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so
So
that
yeah.
that's the key, is like doing something where you're truly out of breath and you might even feel a little bit of that muscle burn, and then extensive rest afterwards. So the anaerobic system is best responding to high intensity, fewer reps, and long rest periods, and infrequency as well. So you go out there and you have a fun sprint with the beagle in the forest once a week. That's plenty. And the sprints need not last longer than 10 to 20 seconds. That's Dr. Craig Marker's message, where there's no such thing as, doing a workout where you quote, air quote, sprint for 30 seconds, 10 times with 30-second break in between another 30-second sprint. And that characterizes like a common spin class where the instructor's cranking up the music and say, okay, we're going to end up with a bunch of sprints because we got a bunch of hills coming. And that's more of a high intensity interval training session, which by and large can also be risky because most of that programming is setting up for the average participant to get exhausted and depleted. And so a true sprint is when you're constraining to very short duration and really using good power and technique and explosiveness, and not having that regression in performance over the workout because you're getting tired. That is not a sprint session. And a lot of people mess that up, especially applying the endurance mentality to something that is completely different, and the anaerobic system working differently than the endurance system.
Well put. Well put. Well, I would just tell you that I was chasing my beagle. This was not a purposeful run. This was me
An
chasing him. So,
escaped convict.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I've had you on a bunch, Brad, and what's your routine look like now? Eating, working out, you're how old? 55?
Oh my gosh, I'm about to turn 60, and mofos better watch out next year because I'm in the 60 plus division
Oh my
in
God,
masters track and
you're gonna
field. I
dominate. You're
can't
gonna be
wait.
like the Tiger Woods of plus 60 plus.
What's amazing out there in the masters track and field scene is you see some of these outliers who are so amazing and magnificent to see what the human body is capable of at the age of 60 or the age of 70. My friend Sue McDonald, who was a guest on my B.rad podcast, she set 15 world records in the female 60 plus division,
Wow.
including running her age in the 400 meters. So at 61 this summer, she ran a 61 in the 400 meters. So if you're not familiar, this is a woman who shows up at college meets and gets an invitation from the meet organizers to line up in the lanes with collegiate female runners and holding her own, even at 61. She was a
Mm.
college athlete back when and was an Olympic trials pole vaulter and had a great career as an athlete. But being able to preserve this incredible level of performance into the older decades is so inspiring for all of us. But to finish my quip here, the field is not that deep, unfortunately. So, the seventh place finisher is hunched over and shuffling across the line and raising their arms that they made it one lap around the track. But, the top people show really what's possible. So, I'm gunning for my own, personal new best times, even as I age. I just want to stay competitive. But that has, caused me to completely evolve not only my workout patterns, but my mentality. Because as a lifelong endurance athlete, I was a pro triathlete for 9 years. I was deep into the extreme endurance performance and training so hard and so many hours. And I kind of have to say goodbye to that and realize that I need more fluctuation in stress and rest patterns in order to develop that explosive anaerobic system. And so sometimes the best use of one's exercise budget are some days that are really super easy and resting and regenerative and nourishing. I have, a lot of nagging minor injuries that come up because I'm old and I'm trying to do crazy stuff like compete in the high jump. And so I have to be really careful about not applying that endurance mentality where every day you wake up and say, "Oh, how many hours or how many miles can I accumulate today in service of my fitness?" And instead say, "Okay, I'm in rest mode, and when I come back, I'm going to do something really impressive because I'm going to harness my energy rather than dispersing it out every single day, as is commonly seen in the endurance community."
So, God, you don't look 59, Brad.
I appreciate that.
I was gonna say, yeah, you look
it's
maybe around 50. So,
I think we're socialized now to accept this disastrous tailspin of accelerated aging in modern society. And one of the most disturbing stats, I think we talked about this on a previous show, is the decline in the average testosterone level of the male, and it's declining at a rate of 1% per year since the 80s. That means someone who's 40 today has 25 or 30% lower testosterone than grandpa did or than dad did.
mm,
And the blame is cast around to a lot of the plastics and the estrogenic compounds in the environment, as well as the global obesity epidemic, because bad body composition will tank your adaptive hormones. And
mhm.
so we have this urgent obligation today to fight this battle with everything we've got, to stave off the accumulation of the spare tire around the midsection, which is such a common notion of aging that we seem to think it's normal. But when you start to add this special kind of fat called visceral fat or abdominal fat to the body, it's an indication of hormone imbalance, and it drives further hormone imbalance and further accumulation of visceral fat. So it's a slippery slope downhill, because when that fat starts to collect around the abdominal organs, it releases this unfortunate inflammatory cytokine agent into the bloodstream, and that will antagonize testosterone. And actually, it's called aromatization. It will convert testosterone into estrogen, causing you to get a bigger spare tire and get a little softer, and then have less energy and less motivation to go out there and slam on those weights or hit those sprints up the hill in order to maintain that youthful physique and youthful testosterone levels.
Now, your routine, what's that look like now? You're 59. I thought you were 55, but you're 59. You're 59. You look great. What have you changed, or what are you doing now as far as eating and workouts?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, over the last 5 years, I've really been obsessed with these peak performance goals in track and field. So high jumping and 400 meters are my favorite events. And so I'm trying to create a schedule that's much like a sprinter. So you can look on YouTube and watch Noah Lyles as he's slamming weights in the gym and doing these challenging sessions. But when I go out to the track now, unlike the old days when I was, trying to hit the endurance goals, I'll do some hard efforts like running for 200 meters at 95% effort. And then you walk and take it easy for several minutes. Because, like you said earlier, a true and proper sprint workout is where you come back to the line and deliver another exceptional effort. So it's not like my tongue's hanging down to the ground like the old days, and I have only three more to go, and then I'm going to do finish all 12 of my quarter mile repeats. That's kind of the endurance game where you're just trying to build that body to withstand and endure. And so now I'm working on my technique, my explosiveness. As I like to joke, I used to be like an Ironman guy, so my race competency extends up to 9 hours. But today, my favorite event literally takes 1 second, or I guess you could say 4 seconds when you're talking about the high jump approach and then the 1 second jump into the air over the bar. So I want to be maximum power and
Mm.
explosiveness. And I don't think this is really aligned with my genetics. Obviously, at my prime, I was a pure endurance guy, but now I'm trying to be the guy who's sky high over the bar and, trying to touch the rim when I get inside a gym and have fun indoors. So it's been kind of a fun transition. And the best part of it for me is that now my goals and my training methods, I believe, are strongly aligned with longevity because I'm keeping that anaerobic explosive system robust and strong. I'm working on my balance and things like that people in their 60s have to start worrying about. And I'm de-emphasizing the exhausting training patterns that I believe accelerate the aging process. And I'll tell you from my time on the pro circuit when I was traveling all over the world and training like crazy and racing at the highest level, that decade from age 20 to 30, when I was on the circuit, I feel like I literally aged my body on a biological level 15 or 20 years. So the 10 years that I spent on the circuit, it cost me 20 years of lifespan, maybe even more. And
Mm.
all I've been trying to do since the day I turned 30 and retired from the pro circuit is unwind that and do nurturing behaviors and fitness adaptations that promote longevity rather than directly compromise it like they do when you're doing extreme endurance stuff.
So a lot of like fast explosive exercises for you. You're obviously doing resistance training a few days a week, I'm assuming.
Yeah, the
And
track
yeah.
athletes, I mean, what's so funny at this age, and anyone who's listening that's getting on the serious level of trying to be good at playing on the community basketball league or doing something crazy like the track and field goals that I have, you realize that the preparation and the mobility, flexibility, and general strengthening and foundation work takes so much time and are so important that they're basically everything. And so if you're going to ask me, what are my goals for the coming season? I'm going to say, like, my number one goal is don't get injured.
Yeah.
My number two
Mm.
goal is don't get injured. My number three goal is the same. And then number seven on the list is, hey, I want to improve my high jump from 5.1 to 5.3. I really think I can do it, but not if I'm injured. So it's
Yeah.
all about this broad-based approach where I'm working on my balance and I'm doing the band work to, engage my glutes and get all prepared before I even try anything crazy. And that's so funny because, like, 20 years ago, I would come out of the stands at the end of the middle school track meet and I'd go take a bunch of high jumps. From sitting and watching the kids compete, I could just go right down there, put the bar up before they, took everything away and get my 6 jumps in. And today it takes me probably an hour of preparation before I'm going to take even a single
Hmm.
practice jump
Yeah.
because it's so jarring and traumatic to the body.
What's one thing you sort of changed your mind on over the last, let's say, 10 years?
Well, I
Mm.
think from your previous podcast guest, Jay Feldman, he had a big influence on me, and other people in the same realm. Dr. Tommy Wood was a great spokesperson for this too. But I'm realizing now that my mantra for the future is recover, perform, recover. And that is how I want to live the rest of my life, is I want to maintain a high level of fitness peak performance and then be able to recover from these efforts to promote longevity, maintain and preserve that lean muscle mass and that VO2 max power and all those things that now are being touted as great markers for longevity. So what that means, what that mantra means is that I want the vast majority of my stress capacity directed toward peak athletic performance and recovery. So I have strongly de-emphasized any other stressors that are introduced in the name of resiliency and adaptability and biohacking and so forth, namely fasting. Because I used to kind of routinely fast until around midday, and then I'd make my meal. And there were so many benefits touted with fasting. And I've written about this at great length in the books that Mark Sisson and I wrote, how your body works best in a fasted state. It's anti-inflammatory, it's antioxidant benefits, the autophagy, the cell repair, all these great things are happening because you're fasting or you're following the ketogenic diet. And so you're making an alternative source of fuel for your brain. And it's so healthy and so awesome. But the thing that we have to remember in the big picture is that these are stress mechanisms. So starving the cells of energy through fasting or starving the body of carbohydrate through a ketogenic diet trigger genetically programmed survival mechanisms, and that is the mechanisms by which you obtain these health benefits. So when you starve yourself, the body goes, oh crap, I'm starving. I better kick into antioxidant, anti-inflammatory cell repair state. Now, for the vast majority of the listening and reading audience, I take back nothing that I've written in any book because most people today eat too much food, too much crappy food, and don't do enough movement. So any transition away from an overfed, inferior activity state is going to be a huge health benefit. And that might mean time restricted feeding because you're going to, by default, consume fewer calories throughout the day. But now, I personally am going for maximum cellular energy status at all times. So I no longer engage in fasting. And in fact, I go out of my way every morning to make a huge B.rad Superfuel protein smoothie, along with a big bowl of fresh fruit. And I eat, incredibly nutritious and highly selective foods, but I
Mhm.
eat pretty much as I can and still, not get fat from overstuffing, which is also nearly impossible when you're eating a really, really clean diet, by the way. But now I'm going for that maximum fueling status so that I can perform and recover to maximum capability. And I love those quips from Jay Feldman where he says, we talk about cold plunging and hot sauna and high intensity workouts and fasting and keto as these triggers, these biohacks to help you develop resiliency, and they're called hormetic stressors. But he says, how come no one ever says arguing with your girlfriend on the same list? Because arguing with your girlfriend or your mean ass boss or whatever those stressors are, they activate the same pathways in the body as your sprint workout or as your fasting session in the morning.
Right.
The
Like a
same
stress,
exact
like that
pathways.
stress, the stress bucket, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Hans Selye, the fight or flight response. It's very simple and known to science that when someone cuts you off on the road and you get lit up, it's the same as doing that fourth interval on the track. And so when I say that I want all my stress capacities directed to my performance, I don't want to get in any arguments with my lovely wife. I don't want to have stress on the workplace or deal with, situations and dysfunctional lifestyle dynamics. And I'm also adding fasting onto that list for me because I have favorable body composition and I'm not concerned about my accumulation of visceral fat. I don't need those sort of interventions where if you're listening and you're struggling with, unfavorable blood markers or body composition, yes, you want to activate these powerful tools like getting lean by eating clean and so forth. But that's my answer to what have I changed my mind on? That's a kind of a major transition in thinking and philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah. Jay's come on a bunch and, paying attention to the stressors. And like you said, like, I can I put a cold plunge in the house and I use it. I've been using it more strategically than ever. I don't think I ever like abused it, but I think people can. And I will say there's been times where I've used it and yeah, I feel great. But then like, I don't know, a few hours later, I'm like cashed out. Like, yeah. So
Right.
and this is on a day where I didn't do anything else really. So I try to use it strategically, not go in there long, but I still enjoy, there are some benefits to it, but like I think if you abuse it, that's when you can, it sort of can work against you.
Yeah, very well said. I like that term cash out because I've
I was,
I've felt that too when I've combined a sprint workout and a
yeah,
cold plunge session. Now,
yeah,
in favor of cold plunge, I'm a big enthusiast and I have a course about it and I've been deeply involved with the game for a long time. Most of us have a embarrassing lack of temperature stress in modern life. So a little bit's pretty good. And if you want to go walk the dogs tonight in the Midwest, and the weather's 37 and you're putting on a light jacket and you come back after 30 minutes and you're a little chilly, that is going to be, I think, a net health benefit to keep you a little bit adaptable and resilient. And I just heard some research being touted about cold therapy. More and more research is coming, and they're saying that one of the best benefits is psychological resilience. And so
sure. Yeah.
if you can do that and get used to it, maybe you're going to get less stressed about that person that cuts you off in traffic or the boss giving you a hard time or dispensing criticism because now you're more badass because of some of these regimens. So that's a huge vote in favor of things like therapeutic. I love when they use that term in front of it, therapeutic cold exposure, not dumbass cold exposure where you're on a dare at the fraternity house who can stay in the tank longer, because that's just a huge stressor to the body and that has, minimal health benefit. And the same goes for exercising and doing too many sprints instead of sticking to a more reasonable template, or doing too many weekly mileage when you do have a mean boss and a mean girlfriend, and you also like to fast and go keto. And we've seen, like in the CrossFit community, a lot of the females trying to build that six pack like the superstars they see on TV. And so they're doing CrossFit and they're doing the ketogenic diet. So they're doing these high glycolytic workouts and then they're not eating carbs after. Guess what's going to crack in that scenario? Yep, your thyroid function, your adrenal function. And that's the part that we need to graduate from and say, hey, be good to your body, throw out some challenges on a regular basis so that you can be a strong, badass person, but don't overdo it, especially in that biohacking realm.
Yeah. Yeah, all great points. I mean, I like your point about psychological resilience. I think, yeah, I like getting in the cold and doing something that's a little more difficult because we're all in our comfort zones all the time. I think
Mm,
there's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you overdo it. And I think nowadays it's all about, it's clickbait. People want people to click on their Instagram profile or whatever it is. So they do crazy things because of that. And so I think
yeah.
we just got to be careful with that.
Yeah,
And
and what's cool now is like Peter T is banging this drum really hard too. Is like fitness and muscle strength is the number one longevity predictor.
right.
It's more so than how badass you are and how many minutes you can spend in the cold water. And so if you can direct most of your stress capacity toward getting and staying fit, that is going to be the biggest payoff. Even more so than tightening up your eating window from a 16 and 8 to a 20 and 4 and all these things that people have dabbled in the name of health, of course, and well-meaning. But it's at a certain point, it's like, look, if you're not able to lift your body weight with a deadlift, or if you're not able to break 8 minutes or 9 minutes in the mile, the famous Cooper Institute study that predicted longevity, they timed people at age 50 in the mile, and their results were very strongly predictive of their ability to live in a healthy manner and make it till age 85. So if you're not hitting those fitness markers, we got to, recalibrate some of the energy allocation and just simply get in shape.
Love it, Brad. Well, another great episode. Always grateful to have you on. Born to Walk, right?
Yeah, we have a website, borntowalkbook.com, and you can
Mm.
pre-order the book now. We have all these incentives and free gifts for you. The book official shipping date is January 7th, but it's kind of a two-part message where, as we touched on a little bit, we kind of take down some of these flawed premises and unintended consequences of the running boom, and then have another part where we're extolling the benefits of a movement-oriented lifestyle, how to aerobic condition properly, and include more walking and all other forms of general everyday movement into your life. Return your feet to proper functionality by, trending toward a more barefoot-inspired experience and all that fun stuff. And then finally talking about the stuff we talked about just now, where you can pursue broad-based functional fitness rather than just being a cardio freak who's good at going in a straight line for 13 or 26 miles, but again can't lift a few sets of bicep curls or can't stretch that orange band on the X3 bar to save their life.
I've taken a break from the X3, but I mix it in from time to time. I might actually do one today, but I've been doing traditional lifting.
Right
So
on.
yeah. Good to
Yeah,
mix
that's
it
a
up.
good little comment there, because people ask all the time, like, what's the best protocol? What should I do? And the single best workout that anyone can do is the one that they enjoy and that they'll stick with. So
Right.
that's whatever environment you need, or whatever, contraption or training partner, set yourself up for success by getting involved in things that are really enjoyable to you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. All right, Brad. Well, I'll let you run. I know you got a busy schedule. I appreciate you coming on. We'll put links in the show notes. Born to Walk book.com coming out soon. When is it coming out? Did you say, or you're not sure?
You can order it right now, pre-order copy, and then the ship date is January 7th. So
January 7th. Oh, perfect
whenever you
timing.
air this show, we're talking
Yeah.
2025, people. It's time to turn the corner and get the proper approach to fitness, especially if you love that steady state cardio. I just want you to do it right. I don't want to take away your joy if you're training for next year's Chicago or New York Marathon right now, but there's a right way to do it, and then there's a very stressful and destructive way to do it.
Yeah, well put. All right, Brad. Well, have a great rest of the day, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.